Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that has completely transformed my life, and I'm confident it can transform yours too. We're talking about training your mind to respond, not react. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to stay with me through this entire video. I know it's tempting to skip around, but the journey we're about to take builds progressively, and I promise you'll miss valuable insights if you jump ahead. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's explore this life-changing concept together. You know those moments when someone says something that pushes your buttons, and before you know it, words are flying out of your mouth that you later regret. Or when a small inconvenience turns into a full-blown bad day because you just couldn't let it go. We've all been there. Those are reactions, automatic, unfiltered, emotionally charged responses that often make situations worse, not better. What if I told you there's a better way? A way that was discovered thousands of years ago by ancient philosophers who dedicated their lives to understanding human nature and mastering the art of living well. This is where Stoicism enters our story. Now, if you're picturing emotionless robots suppressing all feelings, I want you to throw that image away right now. That's not what Stoicism is about. At its core, Stoicism is a practical philosophy that teaches us how to navigate life's challenges with wisdom, courage, and equanimity. The ancient Stoics realized something profound. While we can't control everything that happens to us, we absolutely can control how we respond. This simple yet powerful insight is at the heart of what we're exploring today. As Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most renowned Stoic philosophers, said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. Think about that for a moment. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. When we react impulsively, we're often trying to control things that aren't in our power. When we respond thoughtfully, we're exercising control over the one thing that truly is ours, our mind. But what's the actual difference between reacting and responding? It might seem like I'm splitting hairs here, but the distinction is crucial. A reaction is automatic, unconscious, and often driven by our most primal instincts. It bypasses our higher reasoning and goes straight to fight, flight, or freeze. When we react, we're essentially on autopilot, and our behavior is dictated by patterns established through years of conditioning. These reactions happen in milliseconds, giving us little time to choose how we want to show up in that moment. A response, on the other hand, is conscious, intentional, and aligned with our values. It involves pausing, even if just for a second, to create space between the stimulus and our action. This space, this pause, is where our freedom lies. It's where we can choose wisdom over impulse, compassion over anger, and growth over stagnation. As Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That power over your mind is what we're cultivating when we learn to respond rather than react. And make no mistake, this is a learnable skill. Just like building muscle or learning an instrument, training your mind requires practice, patience, and persistence. But the rewards are immeasurable. Let me share a personal example. A few years ago, I was stuck in terrible traffic on my way to an important meeting. As minutes ticked by, I could feel my stress levels rising. I started honking, cursing under my breath, and mentally catastrophizing about how this delay would ruin everything. By the time I arrived at my destination, I was a ball of stress and irritation. Not only was I late, but I was in no state to be present and effective in my meeting. That was a reaction. Automatic, unproductive, and ultimately harmful to myself and others. Fast forward to a similar situation last month. Same terrible traffic, same important meeting. But this time, something different happened. When I realized I was getting caught in traffic, I took a deep breath. I acknowledged the reality of the situation. I was going to be late, and there was nothing I could do about the traffic. What I could control was how I used this unexpected time and the energy I brought to my eventual arrival. I called ahead to let them know I'd be late, put on a podcast I'd been wanting to listen to, and used the time to mentally prepare for the meeting. When I arrived, I was calm, centered, and ready to engage fully. That was a response. Conscious, effective, and aligned with my values. The difference might seem subtle, but the impact on my well-being, my relationships, and my effectiveness was dramatic. And this is just one small example. Imagine applying this approach to high-stakes conflicts, personal disappointments, professional setbacks, or health challenges. Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, put it this way: "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." How many of our reactions are based not on what's actually happening, but on the catastrophic stories we're telling ourselves? When we learn to pause and respond, we can examine these stories. We can ask ourselves, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this necessary? We can choose a narrative that serves us and others better. Now, I want to be clear about something. Responding rather than reacting doesn't mean ignoring your emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It means developing a healthier relationship with your emotions by acknowledging them without being ruled by them. Emotions are valuable messengers. They tell us important things about our needs, our boundaries, and our values. The goal isn't to silence these messengers, but to listen to them with discernment. When we react, we're often either suppressing our emotions until they explode, or we're letting them run the show entirely. Neither approach serves us well. When we respond, we're saying, "I hear you, emotion. What are you trying to tell me? And what's the wisest way to honor your message?" This brings us to another key aspect of Stoic philosophy, the concept of virtues. For the Stoics, living a good life meant living in accordance with virtues like wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These virtues serve as a compass, guiding our responses even in the most challenging circumstances. As Marcus Aurelius advised, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple words, profound wisdom. When we're triggered and tempted to react, we can ask ourselves, what would wisdom look like in this moment? What would courage look like? What would justice or temperance look like? These questions create that crucial space between stimulus and response, allowing us to act from our highest selves rather than our wounded or triggered parts. But let's be realistic. This isn't easy. We're fighting against neural pathways that have been reinforced over decades, triggered by stimuli that often hit us at our most vulnerable points. The good news is that neuroscience has shown us that our brains are remarkably plastic. They can change and form new pathways throughout our lives. Each time we choose to respond rather than react, we're carving a new neural pathway. Over time, this pathway becomes stronger and more automatic, making it easier to access our wisdom even in challenging moments. Think of it like walking through a field of tall grass. The first time you forge a path, it's difficult, but each time you walk that same route, the path becomes clearer and easier to follow. Eventually, it becomes the path of least resistance. Our responses can become as natural as our reactions once were. But how do we actually do this in practice? How do we train our minds to respond, not react? Let me share some specific strategies that have worked for me and for countless others throughout history. The first, and perhaps most important, strategy is simply to practice the pause. In the space between stimulus and response lies our power to choose. It might be just a second or two, but that brief moment is where our freedom resides. Epictetus advised, "Make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, 'You are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be.'" This is the essence of the pause, recognizing that our initial impression of a situation may not be accurate or complete. So how do we practice the pause? Start with your breath. When you notice yourself getting triggered, take a deep breath. Feel the air filling your lungs, then slowly release it. This simple act activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which helps calm your body's stress response. It brings you back to the present moment and creates space for a more thoughtful response. Another powerful practice is to develop awareness of your triggers. We all have them, those specific situations, words, or behaviors that seem to bypass our rational mind and send us straight into reaction mode. Maybe it's feeling disrespected, or criticized, or excluded. Maybe it's when someone cuts you off in traffic or interrupts you in a meeting. By identifying your triggers, you can be more prepared when they arise. You can say to yourself, here's that trigger again. I know this feeling, and I know I don't have to let it control me. This awareness alone can create the space needed for a wiser response. The ancient Stoics practiced a technique called premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils. They would deliberately imagine challenging situations and mentally rehearse, responding to them with virtue and wisdom. This practice helped them prepare for life's difficulties, making them less likely to be caught off guard and fall into reactive patterns. You can do the same. Take a few minutes each morning to anticipate potential challenges in your day. How might you be triggered? What would a wise response look like? By mentally rehearsing your responses, you're more likely to access them when you need them most. Another key strategy is to examine your beliefs. Our reactions are often driven not by events themselves, but by our interpretations of those events. As Epictetus said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. For example, if I believe that criticism means I'm inadequate, I'll react defensively when someone offers feedback. But if I believe that feedback is an opportunity for growth, I'll respond with curiosity and gratitude. Take some time to identify the beliefs that drive your reactive patterns. Are they serving you? Are they even true? Often, we're operating from beliefs we formed in childhood that no longer reflect reality or help us navigate our adult lives effectively. You might be wondering at this point, what about when I'm dealing with truly difficult people or genuinely unjust situations? Am I just supposed to let it go and be a doormat? Absolutely not. And this is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. Responding rather than reacting doesn't mean passivity or acceptance of wrongdoing. It means choosing your actions deliberately rather than letting them be dictated by impulse. Sometimes the wisest response is firm boundary setting. Sometimes it's disengaging from a harmful situation. Sometimes it's taking decisive action against injustice. The key is that these responses come from your values and wisdom, not from your triggered state. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. When someone behaves poorly, we have the opportunity to show a better way. We break the cycle of reaction by responding with integrity even when others don't. This brings me to another powerful practice, cultivating empathy. Often, our reactions are intensified by our inability to see beyond our own perspective. When we can understand where another person is coming from, even if we disagree with them, we're less likely to take their words or actions personally. Seneca advised, "Whenever you are angry, be assured that it is not only a present evil, but that you have increased a habit." He recognized that each time we react with anger, we strengthen that pattern in ourselves, but the same is true in reverse. Each time we respond with empathy, we strengthen that muscle. Try this. The next time you feel triggered by someone's behavior, pause and ask yourself, what might be going on for this person? What need might they be trying to meet? This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior, but rather seeing the humanity in the other person, which can help diffuse your own reactive tendencies. Now, let's talk about practical ways to create more space between stimulus and response in your daily life. Because while understanding these concepts intellectually is a good start, real change happens through consistent practice. One powerful approach is meditation. Research has shown that regular meditation actually changes the structure and function of our brains, particularly in areas related to attention, emotional regulation, and impulse control, all essential for responding rather than reacting. You don't need to meditate for hours. Even 5 minutes a day can make a difference. The key is consistency. As you sit in meditation, you'll notice thoughts and emotions arising. Instead of getting caught up in them, you practice observing them with curiosity and letting them pass. This is exactly the skill you need when you're triggered in daily life. Another practice is journaling. At the end of each day, reflect on moments when you reacted and moments when you responded. What was the difference? What helped you respond? What triggered your reactions? This reflection builds self-awareness, which is the foundation of change. Remember that quote from Marcus Aurelius, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Journaling helps you see this truth in action in your own life. Physical exercise is another powerful tool. When we're carrying excess stress or tension in our bodies, we're more likely to react impulsively. Regular physical activity helps discharge this energy, making it easier to maintain equanimity when challenges arise. The Stoics recognized the connection between physical and mental discipline. They emphasize moderation in all things, including food, drink, and physical comfort. By strengthening our ability to endure physical discomfort, we also build mental resilience. Musonius Rufus, another prominent Stoic philosopher, said, "It is not possible to be good without the help of physical training." While this might seem strange to modern ears, he understood that mental and physical discipline are deeply intertwined. Let's also consider the role of our environment in shaping our reactions. We're profoundly influenced by the people, information, and stimuli we surround ourselves with. If you're constantly exposed to angry rhetoric, divisive social media, or negative relationships, it's much harder to cultivate a responsive rather than reactive mindset. Take an inventory of your information diet and social circle. Are they supporting your growth toward greater wisdom and equanimity? Or are they reinforcing reactive patterns? Sometimes, the most powerful step you can take is to distance yourself from influences that pull you toward reaction rather than response. As Seneca advised, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. The process is a mutual one. Men learn as they teach. Surround yourself with people who model the kind of responsive, thoughtful approach to life that you're working to cultivate. Now, I want to acknowledge something important. You will mess up. There will be times when, despite your best intentions and practices, you find yourself reacting rather than responding. This is not failure, it's part of the process. The most important thing is how you respond to these moments. The Stoics emphasized the importance of self-examination without harsh judgment. When you notice yourself reacting, take it as valuable information. What triggered you? What belief was activated? What need wasn't being met? Use these insights to deepen your practice rather than as evidence of your shortcomings. As Epictetus said, if you have assumed a character above your strength, you have both acted in this matter in an unbecoming way, and you have neglected that which you might have fulfilled. In other words, be realistic about where you are in your journey. Don't expect perfection, but do commit to growth. This journey of training your mind to respond rather than react is not a destination you reach once and for all. It's a continuous practice. a way of being that you cultivate day by day, moment by moment. Some days will be easier than others. Some triggers will be simpler to navigate than others. The key is persistence. The Stoics used the metaphor of the archer. An archer aims at the target with all their skill and attention. They control their stance, their breath, their focus. But once the arrow leaves the bow, its trajectory is subject to winds and other factors beyond the archer's control. The archer's virtue lies not in hitting the target every time, but in bringing their best skill and intention to each shot. Similarly, our goal is not to respond perfectly in every situation, but to bring our best intention and awareness to each moment. The outcome is not entirely in our control, but our approach is. As we continue this journey together, I want to share some real-world applications of this philosophy, because ultimately, the value of any wisdom lies in how it transforms our lived experience. Consider your relationships. How many arguments escalate because both people are reacting to their triggers rather than responding to each other's needs? How many hurtful words are spoken in the heat of reaction that can't be taken back? When we learn to respond rather than react in our relationships, we create space for genuine connection. We listen more deeply. We speak with greater intention. We navigate conflicts with wisdom rather than weaponizing our words. As Seneca advised, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. How many times have your angry reactions caused more damage than the original offense? By practicing the pause and choosing our response, we can break destructive cycles in our relationships and create new patterns of understanding and connection. This doesn't mean never expressing difficult emotions. It means expressing them from a place of clarity rather than chaos. In your professional life, the ability to respond rather than react is equally transformative. In high-pressure work environments, reactive behavior often leads to poor decision-making, damaged relationships, and increased stress. Imagine receiving critical feedback from a colleague or supervisor. A reactive response might be to defend, deny, or counterattack. A responsive approach would be to listen, consider what might be valid, and engage in a thoughtful conversation about your perspective. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone." This attitude, openness to feedback and willingness to change course when warranted, is the hallmark of a responsive rather than reactive approach to professional challenges. But perhaps the most profound impact of learning to respond rather than react is on our relationship with ourselves. Our internal dialogue, the way we talk to ourselves about our mistakes, our shortcomings, our struggles, often sets the tone for how we engage with the world around us. Many of us have developed patterns of harsh self-criticism. When we make a mistake, we react with judgment and shame rather than responding with compassion and curiosity. This internal reactivity then spills over into our external interactions. Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This applies just as much to our internal experience as to external events. When we learn to respond to ourselves with kindness and wisdom, we're more able to extend that same quality of attention to others. This brings us to a crucial point. Self-care is not selfish, it's essential. Taking care of your mental and emotional well-being isn't a luxury, it's a prerequisite for showing up as your best self in all areas of life. The Stoics emphasize the importance of regular self-reflection and the cultivation of inner tranquility. They understood that our ability to respond wisely to external challenges depends on our internal state. So I encourage you to make time for practices that nurture your inner life, whether that's meditation, time in nature, creative expression, or simply periods of quiet reflection. These practices aren't separate from the work of learning to respond rather than react. They're foundational to it. Now, let's address another crucial area where this philosophy can transform our experience, our relationship with uncertainty and change. Life is inherently unpredictable. Plans fall through, expectations go unmet, circumstances change in ways we couldn't have anticipated. Our reactive pattern is often to resist these changes, to cling to our expectations, and to waste energy, fighting against reality. The Stoics recognized this tendency and offered a different approach. As Epictetus said, "Do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well." This doesn't mean passive resignation. It means acknowledging reality as it is before determining how to respond to it. When we stop reacting against what is and start responding to what is, we free up enormous energy that can be directed toward constructive action. Think about a time when your plans were disrupted by unforeseen circumstances. Perhaps a flight was cancelled, an event was postponed, or a project took an unexpected turn. How much energy did you spend reacting against this reality, complaining, resisting, lamenting? And how much more effective could you have been if you had quickly accepted the new reality and focused on responding wisely to it? As Marcus Aurelius advised, you always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. These things are not asking to be judged by you. Leave them alone. This brings us to another powerful application of our philosophy: navigating the information landscape of the digital age. We're constantly bombarded with news, opinions, and information designed to trigger emotional reactions. Social media algorithms are literally optimized to elicit strong reactions, keeping us engaged and scrolling. In this environment, the ability to pause and respond rather than immediately react is more valuable than ever. It allows us to consider the source, question the framing, and decide whether and how to engage based on our values rather than our triggered emotions. The Stoics didn't have to contend with Twitter or 24-hour news cycles, but they understood the importance of being intentional about what influences we allow into our minds. As Epictetus advised, if a person gave your body to any stranger he met on his way, you would certainly be angry. And do you feel no shame in handing over your own mind to be confused and mystified by anyone who happens to verbally attack you? Consider conducting a review of your information diet. What sources trigger reactive patterns in you? How might you cultivate a more intentional, responsive approach to consuming and engaging with information? As we begin to wrap up our exploration, I want to emphasize something important. The goal of training your mind to respond rather than react isn't to reach some perfect state of perpetual calm. It's to expand your capacity to navigate life's complexities with greater wisdom, compassion, and effectiveness. There will still be times when you feel angry, scared, hurt, or overwhelmed. The difference is that these emotions become data points that inform your response, rather than triggers that dictate your reaction. As Seneca wrote, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. This is the essence of what we've been discussing, creating space between the trigger and your action so that your action can arise from wisdom rather than impulse. This space, this gap between stimulus and response, is where your freedom lies. It's where you can align your behavior with your values rather than your conditioning. It's where you can choose who you want to be in each moment, rather than being driven by automatic patterns. And here's something remarkable. As you practice this approach, you'll find that your capacity for this space grows. What begins as a brief pause can expand into a deep reservoir of clarity and presence that informs all your interactions. The ancient Stoics understood that true freedom doesn't come from controlling external circumstances, an impossible task, but from mastering our internal responses to those circumstances. As Epictetus, who spent much of his early life as a slave, wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." There's profound liberation in this perspective. When we stop exhausting ourselves trying to control the uncontrollable, we can direct our energy toward what truly matters, our own thoughts, choices, and actions. So I invite you to begin this practice today. Start small. Notice one trigger that tends to provoke a reactive response in you. Practice pausing in that moment. Take a breath. Create space. Then choose a response that aligns with who you want to be. Pay attention to the difference this makes, not just in the outcome of the situation, but in how you feel about yourself. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you acted from your highest self rather than your triggered self. Over time, as you continue this practice, you'll build new neural pathways. What once required conscious effort will begin to feel more natural. You'll find yourself responding rather than reacting more often, even in challenging circumstances. Remember what Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." By training your mind to respond rather than react, you're cultivating a way of thinking that leads to greater freedom, effectiveness, and yes, happiness. As we conclude this exploration, I want to leave you with a few questions for reflection. Where in your life would the ability to respond rather than react make the biggest difference? What triggers are most challenging for you to navigate with wisdom? What practices might help you create more space between stimulus and response? I encourage you to reflect on these questions in whatever way works best for you: journaling, meditation, conversation with a trusted friend. The insights you gain will help you tailor this approach to your unique circumstances and challenges. And remember, this is a practice, not a perfect. Be patient with yourself as you learn. Celebrate your progress. When you find yourself reacting, rather than responding, use it as an opportunity for learning rather than a reason for self-criticism. As Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Growth requires us to be beginners, to try new approaches, to make mistakes and learn from them. Embrace this process with curiosity and openness. The journey of training your mind to respond rather than react is one of the most worthwhile endeavors you can undertake. It transforms not only how you navigate external challenges, but how you experience your own inner life. In a world that seems increasingly reactive, your commitment to thoughtful response is a radical act. It's a contribution not only to your own well-being, but to the collective wisdom we so desperately need. Thank you for staying with me throughout this exploration. I hope you found value in these insights and practices. If you have, please share this video with someone who might benefit from it, and let me know in the comments which aspect of this philosophy resonates most strongly with you. Until next time, remember the words of Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength,